Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unpack some really wild AI news. We're looking at how an AI model actually managed to solve a decades-old convex optimization problem. Now, if you follow AI at all, you know the frontier of what large language models can do is constantly shifting. But every once in a while, a milestone hits that makes the math and computer science communities just completely stop in their tracks and take notice. And well, this is absolutely one of those moments.
You might have actually seen this headline catching fire over on Hacker News or Reddit lately, sparking some pretty intense debates about the future of mathematics and AI. The claim here? That OpenAI's GPT-5.6 Sol Pro generated a formal derivation that satisfied the constraints and optimality conditions for a highly complex convex optimization problem. And honestly, the craziest part is that it did this using only its existing checkpoint. No new incremental training was required at all. None. 30 years. That's exactly how long this mathematical gap has just sat there completely unsolved, which really anchors the massive weight of this achievement. Look, for 3 decades, researchers have established all these robust methods for standard optimization, right? But certain highly constrained instances have just stubbornly resisted both analytical attacks and the best numerical solvers we have. Well, until now. So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the 30-year math gap, how Sol Pro actually did it, the human-AI collaboration behind the scenes, how it compares to traditional optimization solvers, the verification bottleneck, and finally, the implications for future research. Let's jump right in. Starting with Section 1, a 30-year math gap, understanding the problem. To really appreciate this breakthrough, we first need to understand the actual mathematical hurdle itself. Convex optimization generally involves minimizing convex functions subject to convex constraints, and it is pretty much foundational to a lot of modern machine learning. Without getting totally bogged down in the dense math weeds here, this proof essentially showed the lower bound time complexity for a specific class of smooth mathematical functions, known as Lipschitz functions. Proving an upper bound is relatively easy, that's just how fast your algorithm runs. But proving a lower bound, that means mathematically constraining all possible algorithms. The AI proved that it requires a minimum number of steps, an omega d squared number of evaluations. It's basically proving that you literally cannot do better than approximating a gradient. Moving right along to Section 2, how Sol Pro did it, the direct path. Let's look at how GPT 5.6 actually pulled this off without any of that incremental training we talked about. So the model basically leveraged its existing checkpoint to follow a very direct prompt-to-derivation path. The workflow is actually surprisingly straightforward. You input the problem statement and all the supporting mathematical context. It generates a formal derivation and then validates it. This approach completely bypasses the traditional encoding pipeline. It shifts the bottleneck away from training the model directly over to prompt engineering and output verification. Which brings us to Section 3, the human-AI collaboration reality check. It's time to step back for a second. We really need to contrast that super impressive headline with the somewhat sobering reality of how much human effort was required to get there. Because, spoiler alert, it wasn't simply a matter of just asking the AI to solve an unsolved problem. The author of the proof, Philip Kerger, revealed a pretty huge detail. This breakthrough actually required a massive 10-page prompt filled with advanced mathematics. 10 pages. And that prompt was built upon a full year of prior research, including a bunch of failed attempts using earlier models like GPT 5.4 and 5.5. The human researcher literally had to outline all reasonable approaches and set up a highly specialized context. I love this quote because it so brilliantly illustrates the human-AI dynamic here. Kerger actually noted that he would have never gotten this result by himself. The human provided the complex concepts, the constraints, basically the raw materials. But the AI, it figured out the deep structural engineering to make the proof hold up. It explored combinations and functions that a human just doesn't have the time or capacity to manually iterate through. Up next is Section 4, comparing optimization solvers, tool versus tool. So how does this disruptive new AI tool actually stack up against traditional, old-school mathematical optimization packages? Take a look at the stark trade-off here. Sol Pro requires a much lower human encoding time, mostly because it just ingests natural language and mathematical context directly. But, and this is a big but, unlike traditional solvers like CVXY or Gurobi, it completely lacks built-in verification. It does not provide certified optimality out of the box. And that leads us perfectly into Section 5, The verification bottleneck: trust but verify. That lack of built-in verification is the primary constraint of this entirely new workflow.
The absolute crucial point to remember here is that the AI doesn't give you a mathematical guarantee. It only hands you a candidate solution. That derivation path then requires manual, or at least automated, re-verification by humans, independent solvers, or formal proof checkers. Until benchmark suites and scaling tests are published, you really have to classify this approach as highly experimental.
Finally, Section 6, Implications for Future Research, Measuring Success. What should you actually take away from this if you're a researcher looking to explore this new AI paradigm? Because right now, let's be honest, this is just a single data point. To treat this as a reliable proof of concept rather than just a, neat party trick, researchers really must strictly track a few key metrics. First, prompt structure stability. Like if you slightly reword that 10-page prompt, does the whole derivation path fall apart? Second, verification overhead. How much independent checking is actually required to confirm that optimality? And third, context window utilization. How much of the model's total capacity is getting chewed up just providing the background math?
So we'll leave you with this somewhat provocative thought today. If closing a 30-year gap required a full year of human research and a highly specialized 10-page prompt, are human domain experts actually about to become more vital than ever? It's a fascinating shift in how we approach problem solving, moving from pure calculation to essentially orchestrating AI logic. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer, and we will definitely see you next time.